Beloved, chosen one, you weren't born to blend in. You were built to be the question they can't answer, the presence they can't explain, and the frequency they can't forget. Now imagine this for a moment. You walk into a room, and suddenly the air feels heavier, not for you, but for them. Eyes shift, conversations falter. People glance your way like they've just seen a ghost, wearing confidence. They act normal. But something in their spirit stirs, their heartbeat changes, and they don't even know why. You haven't spoken, you haven't moved differently, yet your very presence unsettles what they've been trying to hide. You become the glitch in their matrix, the silence that screams louder than their most polished words. Science has already caught up to what the universe knew. Behavioral studies reveal that certain people, the quiet, observant, and calm, trigger deep emotional reactions in others simply by existing. No spotlight, no performance, just presence. That's you, chosen one, the unexpected variable in a script they've been reading blindly. They don't know whether to envy you, fear you, or worship you, but they know they can't ignore you. They've been tracking you. Some have tried to decode your background, some to analyze your stillness, searching for cracks in your story. But what they've found is far more unsettling: resilience. You weren't supposed to make it through the storms you faced. You weren't supposed to rise after the betrayal, the loss, the darkness. And yet, here you are, still standing, still glowing, still untouchable in all the ways they hoped you'd break. You didn't audition for this attention, it was given to you, because your very existence exposes illusions. People build entire identities on facades, but then you show up, Raf, real and unapologetic. Suddenly, they feel fake. That's the root of their obsession and discomfort. You're the mirror they never asked for but can't stop looking into. And here's the wild part. People you barely think about are analyzing your every move, wondering why their thoughts keep returning to you like a song they can't get out of their head. They don't realize it's not just you, it's the effect. Your energy is a truth serum. You don't have to speak. Their insecurities do it for you. So, chosen one, don't shrink to make them comfortable. You're not here to soothe their illusions. You're here to wake them up, whether they like it or not. That's why they can't stop watching. Even those who mock you secretly wish they carried what you carry, that silent power, that unshakable aura, that impossible to explain peace. Maybe you've been feeling it, people acting strange, reaching out unexpectedly, keeping tabs on you like you're a puzzle they can't solve. It's not paranoia, it's proof. You've stepped into a higher level, and now the world is scrambling to keep up. Before we go deeper, I want to pause and thank you, truly thank you for being here, for watching, for listening, for walking this journey alongside me. To everyone who has supported this work through Super Thanks, I'm so deeply grateful. Your generosity fuels this mission. And if you haven't, know this: you are just as valued, just as loved, and just as important simply for being here. If you're feeling this in your spirit right now, type 777 inch the comments as your declaration that you're aligned, awake, and ready for the next revelation. Now, let's break down exactly why your energy pulls people in, shakes them up, and leaves a mark they can't erase. God's chosen ones. Everyone's shocked. Who are you, and how did you do this? Number one, they can't forget you, and it's quietly destroying them. Chosen one. Let's get one thing straight from the beginning. You didn't just pass through their life like a name on a guest list. You were the chapter they keep rereading, the scene they replay in the quiet hours, the sentence they can't finish because it still stings. You didn't leave a polite memory, you left a scar. And here's the thing about scars, they heal. But they never disappear. They smile through it in public. But when the crowd is gone, they bleed over it in silence. Why? Because you weren't a breeze, you were a storm. You didn't give them warning signs or time to prepare. You came like lightning sudden, undeniable, impossible to ignore. You left a silence so loud it drowns out their fake laughs and curated smiles. They didn't lose you because you burned a bridge. No, they set the fire themselves, trying to cling to something that was never theirs to keep, your energy. And now, that loss gnaws at them like an unanswered question they can't stop asking. Think about it. Have you ever met someone whose very presence stripped away all your excuses? That's what you did. You didn't break them with words. You broke the illusion they'd been hiding behind for years. You didn't arrive with a polished script. You weren't auditioning for their approval. You just existed, fully and unapologetically, and that alone collapsed their carefully built image. As Proverbs 28:1 says, "The wicked flee when no one pursues, but the righteous are bold as a lion." Your boldness wasn't loud, but it was unshakable. Picture this. Someone spends years crafting a wall around their ego, like a fortress made of polished stone. Then you walk in no armor, no performance, and your authenticity rips through the entire structure in seconds. That's what they felt. That's why they can't forget you. You're not just a memory, you're the aftershock of truth they never saw coming. And yet, here's the irony. They act like they've moved on. They post filtered happiness, new friends, and highlight reels. But at night, they scroll back to your posts, back to your name, back to the energy that shifted something in their soul. They don't miss your voice. They miss the way their spirit came alive in your presence. You awakened a part of them they didn't even know existed. And now that you're gone, they can't replicate it. They're chasing shadows that look like you, but feel hollow. You, on the other hand, aren't chasing closure. You're not orchestrating revenge. You're not even trying to prove your point. You're simply living, and that unsettles them more than anything. As Ecclesiastes 3:14 says, "I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him. Your presence was divine work, and it can't be undone." Here's what's fascinating. The farther you go, the stronger your presence feels in their life. Energy doesn't fade, it lingers, especially when it's real. Remember Princess Diana? She didn't have to shout to be unforgettable. Her grace and compassion left a permanent mark on the world. You have that same unreplicable essence. They replace you with noise, but nothing fits, nothing feels the same. They resent that they still care. And deep down, they know why. Because you became a mirror they didn't want to look into. You didn't humiliate them, you exposed them to themselves. And that's the wound they'll never show anyone. You might be wondering, why do I always leave such a deep impact? Because you're not surface level. You didn't blend in. Your soul spoke louder than your words. You listened when others just talked. You noticed when others ignored. You carried empathy, like armor, not weakness. And you never begged to be seen. That's why you remind me of Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, who changed countless lives just by being present, intentional and real. Some of them only met you once, But that single encounter was enough to alter the course of their thinking, just like when Martin Luther King Jr. delivered a single speech that still echoes decades later. You spoke to their soul without trying to impress them, and now, years later, they still feel the imprint of that day. It's not manipulation, it's soul recognition. You didn't walk in looking for applause, you walked in carrying peace. Psalm 29:11 says, "The Lord gives strength to his people. The Lord blesses his people with peace." That peace was your power. They didn't know what to do with it. Because peace exposes chaos. They've met louder people, richer people, even more outwardly impressive people, but none of them carried that sting of truth wrapped in quiet confidence. You didn't flood them with opinions, you flooded them with presence. You were their before and after moment. The dividing line in their story. Some will never say it aloud, but inside, they're still trying to solve the riddle of you. You're like Steve Jobs in the tech world. People can try to imitate, but they can't duplicate the innovation that comes from authenticity. Your energy isn't a formula, it's a frequency. So hear me. Chosen one, don't ever question your impact again. Don't let their silence convince you it was all in your head. Isaiah 55:11 declares, "So is my word that goes out from my mouth. It will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I desire." You were sent into their life for a purpose, and that purpose was fulfilled. They can try to erase you, but you've already become the ghost in their mind. The unshakable lesson in their spirit you didn't come to entertain, you came to awaken. And for people addicted to pretending, that's the most terrifying thing they'll ever experience. You weren't aiming to be unforgettable, you were simply whole. And wholeness can't be unseen, it can't be buried. As John 1:5 says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." End of. That's why they're still haunted. That's why they're still scrolling. That's why they're still asking, who was that? And how did they do this? Number 2, you didn't break them, you woke their demons. And they couldn't handle the light. Chosen one. Let's get brutally honest. You didn't step into their life with chaos. You stepped in with light. The chaos was already living inside them, wearing a smile, shaking hands, playing polite. And the moment your light entered the room, their darkness panicked. You didn't have to say a word. You didn't have to accuse them of anything. You simply existed, and something in them started to tremble. Have you ever noticed how some people smile at you while their eyes tighten just a little too much? How they compliment you with a voice that doesn't match the words? That's not confusion. That's a spiritual reaction. You weren't the storm, you were the forecast they ignored until the sky broke open. And when you showed up, you carried something rare, a calmness their soul didn't know how to sit with. As John 1:5 says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." That's exactly what happened. Your light didn't need to shout to overpower their shadows. It just needed to show up. Think of it like this. Imagine a long hallway lined with mirrors. Every mirror is dusty, cracked, or covered. Nobody's seen their real reflection in years. Then you walk in clear, polished, unbroken, and suddenly, without trying, you become the mirror they can't look away from. You reflected back their jealousy, their fear, their hidden lies, all without a single accusation. Isn't it interesting how your mere presence can cause such an earthquake? Look at how it plays out in history. When Harriet Tubman escaped slavery and then came back to lead others to freedom, She didn't bring new chains to the south. She simply showed a light on the chains that were already there, and that terrified those who built their power on darkness. You carry the same spiritual signature. You didn't trigger their temper, you triggered the truth they'd buried. You became the crack in the mask they had worn for years. It wasn't your words that cut them, it was your refusal to play their game. You didn't beg for a place in their story, and you didn't perform to keep their approval. Your peace was louder than their performance. And when a person's entire identity is built on pretending, authenticity feels like an attack. That's why they hover around you like vultures, talking bad about you with one breath and watching your every move with the next. Have you noticed? The ones who criticize you the loudest are often the same ones who can't stop checking up on you. It's because your life exposes the work they refuse to do. Psalm 27:1 says, "The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear?" And when you walk in that light, it scares those who worship shadows. Let's go deeper. You didn't walk into their life carrying a torch of destruction. You walked in with the oil of peace. The fire they felt wasn't yours, it was theirs, burning against the truth you represented. Nelson Mandela didn't break apartheid by matching its violence. He broke it by standing in unshakable dignity, and that dignity shamed the lie. You carry that same weight. Here's the harsh truth. They didn't realize how far they'd fallen until they stood next to someone who had already climbed out of their own pit. That contrast is brutal. It forces self-examination, and not everyone is ready for that. So instead, they project. They say, it's your attitude, your energy, your vibe. But deep down, they know it's them. They were already bleeding. You just made them see the blood. Think of it like someone living in a house with torn wallpaper and flickering lights. Over time, they call it home and stop noticing the mess. Then you walk in clean shoes, fresh air, no dust on you. Now they can't unsee the dirt. That's you. You bring presence into places built on pretense, and that exposure feels like judgment. Even when you've said nothing, you didn't come to destroy their world, you came to remind them that a better one exists. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that." Your very being proves it. Your life says, it's possible to live free, to love clean, to walk in peace. And for those who refuse to heal, that message feels like an insult. They call you intimidating, cold, distant, but that's projection. They can't manipulate what they can't understand. Philippians 4:7 says, "And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." That peace in you is exactly what they can't comprehend and exactly what they fear. So what do? They watch. They stalk. They mimic. Some even try to become a light version of you. But here's the catch. Energy can't be faked. Serena Williams didn't earn her presence on the tennis court through imitation. She earned it through years of private training, discipline, and pain turned into power. Your aura is the same, forged in fire, not borrowed from someone else, chosen one. You must see it clearly now. You were the test they didn't know they were taking. Not everyone failed, but the ones who did failed loudly. They blamed you for the war, your light exposed, instead of thanking you for showing them the truth. That's not your burden to carry. Matthew 5:14 reminds you, you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. So don't dim yourself. Don't shrink to make them comfortable. Keep walking. Keep shining. Keep growing. You weren't sent to please their shadows. You were sent to awaken, something they thought was dead. And every time they remember you, and trust me, they will, they'll also remember the person they could have become if they'd faced their truth. And that, chosen one, is why your presence will always be the earthquake in someone else's denial. You didn't break them, you woke them. And the sound of those demons screaming, that's proof you were carrying heaven's light all along. Number 3, they couldn't label you. So they lied because the truth was too big for them to handle. Chosen one. Tell me, have you ever noticed how the more unexplainable you are, the more some people feel the need to explain you to others, not explain to you. Explain about you. They couldn't label you, so they chose to lie. And when people can't understand a thing, their first instinct isn't always to learn sometimes. It's to destroy. Why does your existence bother them so much? Why does your silence seem louder than their noise? You don't even have to speak. And yet they shift in their seat when you walk into the room. It's because you don't fit their script. You don't play by their categories. You're not predictable. You're not small enough to be dismissed. You are living proof that God's anointing breaks every human-made mold. Isaiah 54:17 reminds you, no weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment, you shall condemn. This isn't just poetic, it's prophecy over your life. Their words are weapons, but heaven has already disarmed them. You're not the type they can slap a label on and move past. You are the contradiction they can't reconcile, gentle yet fierce, humble yet commanding, peaceful yet utterly unshakable. And that kind of presence short-circuits people who rely on predictable patterns to feel powerful. So, what's the easiest move for them? They lie, they whisper, they twist your story until it's unrecognizable, not because you wronged them, but because your depth made them see their own shallowness. Have you ever stood in front of art you didn't understand? Some people stare in awe, others feel frustrated, and a few, instead of admitting their lack of understanding, dismiss it as ugly or pointless. That's you. You are the painting they can't interpret. So they reduce you to something that fits their limited vocabulary. This has happened before in history. Think of Joan of Arc, a young woman with unshakable conviction who terrified political and religious leaders because she didn't fit their image of who should lead. They couldn't label her faith, so they labeled her a heretic. Or consider Galileo accused and silenced, not because he was wrong, but because his truth disrupted their control. You, chosen one, are cut from that same cloth. They don't ask, who is this person really? Because they want to know you. They ask it because they want an explanation that makes you smaller, a version of you that's easier to dismiss. So, they create stories, add dramatic shading, exaggerate your movements, and dress their jealousy up as concern. Proverbs 18:8 says, the words of a gossip are like choice morsels. They go down to the inmost parts. They know if they feed people a certain version of you long enough, it will stick. But here's the part they can't control. Your truth isn't built on their opinion. Your presence isn't maintained by public approval. That's why you never had to shout to be heard. You moved with intention, with quiet authority, and your stillness was louder than their loudest chaos. Think about Jesus standing silent before Pilate, Matthew 27-14. His refusal to play into the narrative was more powerful than any defense he could have spoken. That's you. Let's get real. Half of what they say about you isn't based on facts. It's based on how they felt when you were around. Your presence made them confront parts of themselves they didn't want to see. That discomfort mutated into slander. That inner shaking transformed into rumors. It's easier for them to paint you as dangerous than to admit they felt small standing next to you. Look at Malala Yousafzai, attacked and lied about. Not because she was a threat in action, but because her very voice threatened oppressive systems. That's the pattern. When your mere existence exposes the cracks in someone else's foundation, they'll try to convince the world the cracks are in you. Chosen one. You didn't trigger hate, you triggered exposure. You didn't bring destruction, you brought reflection. And here's the truth they can't rewrite. Mirrors don't lie. You were never their enemy. You were the truth they couldn't survive looking at for too long. So let me ask you, how many times have you tried to clear your name with people who were committed to misunderstanding you? How many times have you shrunk your light to make someone else's darkness feel less obvious? Philippians 2:15 tells us to shine among them like stars in the sky. You were never meant to dim yourself for someone else's comfort. Even in the Bible, David faced this. Saul couldn't define David's anointing, so he tried to redefine him as a threat. Not because David had wronged him, but because David's presence reminded Saul of everything he had lost. That's exactly why they target you. The beautiful part, the truth always outlasts the lie. Lies have to be maintained. Truth stands on its own. The same people who once believed the rumors will eventually witness your fruit, your faith, and your freedom, and they'll know. So keep being the unlabelable, undeniable, unshakable chosen, one God created. Don't give them the gift of explaining yourself. Let your light speak, because sooner or later, they'll realize you weren't the villain in their story. You were the chapter they weren't ready to read. Number 4. You didn't just survive, you outlived the pain that was meant to bury you. Chosen one. Pause for a moment and really think about this. How many people secretly bet against you? How many smiled to your face while quietly waiting for the storm to finish you off? How many assumed that when the betrayal hit, when the lies spread, when the walls closed in, you'd fold under the weight? They thought you'd drown quietly in the very storm they helped create. They thought the fire would consume you and leave only ashes. And yes, you did break, but not in the way they wanted. You didn't break down. You broke free. Free from the expectations that kept you small. Free from the trauma loops that had you reliving pain on repeat. Free from the heavy cloak of being misunderstood. As Romans 8:37 declares. No. In all these things we are more than conquerors through Him who loved us. You are walking proof that pain doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it forges warriors in the furnace of affliction. Let's be honest, they saw the betrayal. They knew about the setups. Some didn't just watch, they actively cheered for your collapse. And when the collapse never came, when instead you started to rise, it left them rattled. Have you noticed how silence from your enemies can be louder than their insults? That's because they don't have a script for your survival. They keep asking themselves, how did you survive that? Why aren't you broken? They're still scrolling your life for cracks, still hoping to spot some sign of weakness. But you're not giving them any, not because you're pretending, but because the very places they tried to wound you have healed into armor. It's like watching a building burn to the ground. The crowd gathers, shaking their heads, convinced nothing will rise again. But weeks later, they see construction, stronger beams, fireproof walls, a new design. That's you. You were supposed to be ruins. Instead, you became the blueprint. This is a story the world knows well. Nelson Mandela emerged from 27 years in prison, not broken, but more determined and dignified than ever. Malala Yousafzai took a bullet to the head and came back to champion education worldwide. Viktor Frankl, surviving the Holocaust, used his suffering to teach the world about meaning and resilience. What about you? Haven't you also taken the blows meant to silence you and turned them into the very reasons you speak louder? Psalm 66:10-12 says, "For you, God, tested us, you refined us like silver. We went through fire and water, but you brought us to a place of abundance." That's your testimony. They expected pain to shrink you, but you used every ounce of it as fuel. You let it strip away what was fake, until all that remained was raw, unshakable truth. They expected to see a victim. What emerged instead was a force. You now walk with a peace that makes no sense to those who've never survived. A real war, emotional, spiritual, social, or even physical. You carry the eyes of someone who has stared into the abyss and come back with clarity. And that clarity, it terrifies them. You're not trying to prove anything anymore, and that's what makes them feel powerless. Gandhi once said, "First, they ignore you. Then they laugh at you. Then they fight you. Then you win." You've lived every stage of that sentence. Now you stand in the "you win" stage. Not because you fought louder, but because you lasted longer. John 16:33 reminds us, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world." That overcoming spirit lives in you. You are not what happened to you, you are what outlived it, learned from it, and evolved through it. They can't believe you're still showing up, still building, still creating. They expected addiction, collapse, or disappearance. Instead, you're here stronger than ever, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. Oprah Winfrey, born into poverty and abuse, turned her pain into an empire of influence. You, chosen one, are building your own legacy from the same principle. Nothing wasted. Isaiah 61:3 says God will give you a crown of beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, and a garment of praise for the spirit of despair. You've become living proof of that promise. And now, here's the part they can't say. Out loud, they remember the storm, and they remember their role in it. They know what they said, they know what they did, and they watch you now in silent disbelief, realizing that their best attempts to destroy you became the origin story of your strength. So let me ask you, why would you ever hide your light now? Why would you water down a testimony that cost you this much to carry? Every time you walk forward, you are proof that the pain didn't win. You didn't just survive, you rewrote the ending. And now you're the one they can't stop watching. Not because they want to see you fail, but because deep down, they're still trying to understand how you turned their storm into your stage. Number 5. Your silence isn't empty, it's encrypted power they'll never decode. Chosen one. Have you realized yet that the loudest thing about you isn't your voice, it's your quiet? Have you noticed how your stillness makes the noisiest people in the room shift in their seats? You don't have to announce yourself. You don't have to explain your moves. You don't have to defend your choices. And yet, somehow, you unsettle them more than any public confrontation ever could. Why? Because silence is the one thing they can't manipulate. And you wield it like a master. They're not afraid of what you say, they're afraid of what you don't say. They're not nervous because of your words, they're nervous because of what you might be thinking while you're not speaking. It's not your posts that bother them, it's what you don't post. It's not your replies that keep them up at night. It's the unanswered questions you leave hanging in the air. Proverbs 17:28 says, "Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent." and discerning if they hold their tongues. You've turned this truth into an art form. Your silence isn't absence, it's a deliberate signal, a coded language. Only the spiritually awake can interpret. Picture it, a room filled with voices, everyone shouting over one another to be heard. Then you walk in, no announcement, no attempt to match their volume, and the entire atmosphere shifts without saying a word. You become the focal point. That's what stillness does when it's loaded with presence. Throughout history, those who understood this principle changed the world without raising their voices unnecessarily. Queen Elizabeth I was known for calculated pauses in negotiations, letting her silence speak volumes. Michael Jordan didn't respond to every critic, he let his performance deliver the answer. Rosa Parks said more by sitting quietly than most could with 1,000 speeches. That's you, chosen one. You let your restraint amplify your strength. Your quietness is not weakness. It's not passivity. It's strategy. You know exactly what you're doing when you choose not to engage. You've learned that sometimes the most powerful move is to close your mouth and open your eyes. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." Your stillness is rooted in divine trust. You don't need to wrestle for control because you already know who holds it. They can't handle not knowing what's going on behind those calm eyes. Your stillness triggers their noise. Your refusal to react flips their entire game plan upside down. They want access, but you've locked the gates. They want a fight, but you've denied them the battlefield. And because their understanding of power is so shallow, they mistake your silence for weakness, not realizing it's the highest form of control. Here's the truth: the less you say, the more they imagine, and the more they imagine, the more they reveal about themselves. Have you noticed how your silence makes them start talking in circles, trying to fill the space with assumptions? That's because mystery forces people to confront their own insecurity. Jesus himself practiced this. In Matthew 27:14, when accused before Pilate, he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Sometimes silence is the most shocking reply. They gossip to fill the space your silence leaves behind. They connect dots that don't exist, invent scenarios that never happened, and spread stories just to feel in control of your mystery. But deep down, they know they don't have the data, and that bothers them more than any public argument could. Your silence is sacred because it's been refined by pain, wisdom, and strategy. It's not about hiding from conflict. It's about choosing battles worthy of your energy. Every time you choose not to respond, you're making a power move they can't compete with. Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War, "He will win who knows when to fight and when not to fight." You've mastered that. Every glance you give, every insult you ignore, every step you take without announcing it, all of it sends a message they're not equipped to decode. You're not hiding out of fear, you're holding your fire. You see the entire chessboard while they're distracted by pawns. Ecclesiastes 3:7 reminds us there's a time to keep silence and a time to speak. You, chosen one, have learned to master that timing. They're not disturbed because your silence is void. They're disturbed because it's full of meaning, full of intent, full of strategy they can't penetrate. Look at Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in the world, who famously avoids over-explaining his investment moves. That quiet has built him empires. Your quiet is doing the same in your own lane. So, how many times have you seen someone try to provoke you, only for your silence to make them unravel faster than your words ever could? How often has holding your tongue revealed more truth than an argument would? They fear you not because you're loud, but because they can't hear your next move. They don't know when you'll speak, what you'll reveal, or how you'll act, and that unpredictability is power. You've mastered the kind of presence that makes people lean in, even when you give them nothing to grab onto. Remember, chosen one, the world measures power in noise, but heaven measures it in wisdom. Keep your silence sacred. Protect it like the treasure it is, because every time you withhold what they crave, you remind them of the one truth they can't stand. They are not in control of you. Number 6. You weren't just a person, you were a frequency they'll never recover from. Chosen one. Have you ever wondered why certain people can't stop thinking about you, even years later? Why your memory lingers like a note that refuses to fade? It's because you weren't simply a person in their story. You were a frequency, a living, breathing resonance their soul wasn't prepared for. And now they'll never hear silence the same way again. You didn't speak their language, you shifted their vibration. What they felt when they met you wasn't just charm, intellect, or physical beauty. It was something ancient, timeless, and untouched by imitation. It was the kind of spiritual tone that can't be bought, learned, or borrowed. You carried a resonance that stirred the soul before the mind had time to explain it. Psalm 42:7 says, "Deep calls to deep in the roar of your waterfalls. All your waves and breakers have swept over me." That's what happened when they encountered you. Something deep within them answered a call they didn't know existed. You didn't walk into rooms announcing power. You didn't need mystical phrases, dramatic gestures, or attention-seeking tactics. You simply were. And that authenticity alone shook their internal compass. You moved with a peace that wasn't fragile or fabricated. It was forged in fire, shaped by chaos, and refined in solitude. Have you ever turned on a light in a dark room and noticed how people instinctively look toward it? That's you. Not blinding, not demanding, but steady, warm, and undeniable. Your presence illuminated what was already there, but hidden. For some, that light was comforting. For others, it was convicting. Consider Mother Teresa, small in stature, quiet in demeanor, yet her presence alone shifted atmospheres because it carried heaven's compassion. Or Maya Angelou, whose voice wasn't just sound, but soul in motion. You carry that same unteachable quality, an energy that bypasses intellect and speaks directly to the spirit. Your vibration didn't appeal to their logic. It bypassed the mind entirely and went straight to the part of them they'd been avoiding. That's why some felt anxious, restless, or even emotional around you. It wasn't you, it was the awakening you triggered in them. And awakenings are rarely comfortable. John 10:27 reminds us, "My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me." You didn't just speak. Your frequency was recognized by the part of them that longs for truth, even if they've buried it under years of pretense. Some romanticized you, thinking they fell for you. Others tried to attack, diminish, or dismiss you. But it didn't matter. The shift had already happened. Once someone encounters a higher frequency, they can't unknow it. Like hearing a perfect pitch for the first time, they'll always recognize when something's off afterward. You didn't show up to blend into dry, lifeless places. You were sent to disrupt, to shift, to remind people that something deeper is not only possible, it's required. Think of Martin Luther King Jr. He didn't just speak words. He carried a presence that made injustice feel unbearable to witness. Or think of Nikola Tesla. whose ideas and energy were so far ahead of his time that people still haven't caught up. Your silence, your awareness, your calm knowing said more than hours of explanation ever could. You've been where they are, and you've returned from somewhere higher. That's what disturbs them, not arrogance, but evidence. You've seen through the noise and still chosen peace. You feel both ancient and new at the same time. You hold no worldly title, yet command respect from souls without trying. Eclesiastes 3:11 says, He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. You are living proof of that eternity, a reminder that there is more beyond the surface. They can't explain you, they can't categorize you, and most of all, they can't forget you, because you didn't just interact with them, you realigned them. You were the tuning fork in human form, hitting a note that made their soul remember something it had forgotten. Look at the life of Jesus. Even his enemies couldn't ignore him. They didn't always understand him, but they couldn't erase the impact of his presence. That's the pattern you follow. So, chosen one, ask yourself, why would you ever water down the very essence that God placed in you? Why would you apologize for a frequency that was designed to awaken sleeping souls? Matthew 5:14-15 says, You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. No, you weren't just a moment in someone's life. You were a shift in their entire rhythm, and once someone hears that tone, they will spend the rest of their life comparing everything else to it. Number 7. You saw the real them and then left them alone with it. Chosen one. Have you ever seen someone's soul so clearly that you couldn't unsee it? Have you ever looked past the polished smile, past the curated image, straight into the hidden machinery of who they really are, and realized it wasn't your job to fix it? That's what you did. You didn't destroy their mask. You simply stopped applauding the performance. Your presence never just made people feel good in the surface level way they were used to. It made them feel seen, not in the shallow, ego-feeding way they crave, but on a soul level, the kind of seeing that catches the pain behind the pride, the doubt behind the confidence, the fear beneath the smile. For a moment, you gave them something rare, the experience of being truly known. Think of how few people ever see past the front stage into the backstage mess. That's what you gave them. But here's where the unraveling began. They mistook your empathy for admiration. They assumed your kindness was a green light to keep performing. They thought you were impressed, when in truth, you were simply aware. Proverbs 20:5 says, The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out. You have that insight not because you pry, but because your spirit is tuned to truth. And once you saw the truth, you didn't feed their ego, you didn't hype their image. You let them stand in their reality without the applause they had built their identity around. Imagine a house of mirrors, held together by constant praise and performance. Everyone who enters claps and congratulates them on how perfect it all looks. Then you walk in, see through the trick, smile politely, but never clap. And when you leave, the reflections start to crack. That's what happened. You didn't break their illusion, you just stopped feeding it. And it starved. History shows us this pattern. Think of Galileo, who quietly presented the truth about the universe, refusing to feed the false narratives of his time, and in doing so, he exposed the fragile pride of those in power. Or Maya Angelou, whose poetry didn't flatter the world's illusions, but spoke directly to the wounds beneath them, or Anthony Bourdain, who saw through cultural veneers and revealed raw humanity without sugarcoating it. You stand in that same tradition of truth-tellers. They weren't addicted to you, they were addicted to how they felt when you were in the room. Your presence gave them a false sense of depth, a glow they mistook as their own. When you pulled back your light, their reality dimmed, and instead of facing why, they spun the story. You ghosted them. You changed. You became cold. Isaiah 5:20 warns, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness." You refusing to worship their mask felt like darkness to them, but in truth, it was the light exposing what was false. Here's the part that unsettles them most. You never exposed them publicly. You never called out their lies in front of an audience. You simply withdrew. You stopped affirming a role that didn't exist. You stopped being their emotional crutch. And without that supply, they had to face themselves, maybe for the first time in years. Think of Princess Diana. She saw the truth of the life she had stepped into, refused to keep performing for the sake of image, and in doing so, forced a global conversation about authenticity in power. You've done the same in your own way. They couldn't handle love that wasn't worship. Your love was steady, honest, and real, but it wasn't blind. And when they realized they couldn't manipulate it, they lost interest in the relationship, but not in the memory of it. Because what they really miss isn't you, it's who they pretended to be when you were watching. John 8:32 says, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." The tragedy is, instead of letting that truth free them, they ran from it. They chose the comfort of illusion over the discomfort of transformation. So, chosen one, let me ask you, how many times in your life have you pulled your light back? Not out of spite, but because you refused to energize what was fake. How often have you walked away from a performance without tearing down the stage? That's not cruelty, that's wisdom. You didn't abandon them. You returned their illusion to its rightful owner, and until they decide to live without it, they'll keep remembering you as both the safest and the most unsettling presence they ever knew. Number 8. You didn't just enter their life, you cracked the foundation it was built on. Chosen one. Have you ever met someone who seemed perfectly put together, titles polished, image curated, confidence unshakable, until you got close enough to see the hairline cracks beneath it all? That's exactly what happened when you stepped into their world. You didn't come in swinging a wrecking ball. You didn't even raise your voice. But somehow, without effort, you became the earthquake their carefully built world wasn't designed to withstand. You didn't ruin them, you revealed them. You didn't knock over their house of cards with rage. You walked in carrying truth, and the breeze of your authenticity was enough to make it collapse. And now, they're standing in the wreckage, looking at the mirror and blaming it for the reflection. Isaiah 28:17 says, "I will make justice the measuring line and righteousness the plumb line. Hail will sweep away your refuge, the lie, and water will overflow your hiding place." You didn't come to destroy, you came to measure. And when truth measures illusion, the cracks can no longer hide. You weren't just a presence, you were a collision. You didn't cause a ripple. You hit like a spiritual meteor. And now, nothing fits the same. They'll tell themselves you disturbed their peace. But here's the truth. They never had peace to begin with. They had control. They had masks. They had illusions polished to perfection. And you shattered all of it simply by being real. Have you noticed how often the people most obsessed with control are the most shaken by authenticity? You didn't expose them with speeches or accusations. Your energy spoke truths they'd been avoiding for years. You saw through the ego without pointing a finger. You noticed the soft spots in their armor, the hollowness behind their applause, the fear trembling behind their performance. Think of Harriet Tubman. She didn't walk into the South to humiliate anyone. She simply opened a door to freedom. And for those who relied on keeping others in chains, that was enough to crack their world apart. Or consider the way Rosa Parks quietly disrupted an entire system by refusing to move her seat. That's the kind of disruption you carry. Chosen one. You didn't light the fire, they were already burning. You just opened the windows and let the smoke out so everyone could see. That's why they're unsettled. You didn't add to their chaos. You simply refused to be fooled by their version of order. Imagine someone building their entire identity like a fragile glass sculpture, all shine, no strength. Then you walk in, not to destroy, but simply to breathe. And even that is enough to make the structure tremble. Luke 8:17 tells us, "For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open." Your presence has that verse written all over it. They weren't ready for someone who could see them without needing them. You didn't flatter their comfort zone, you questioned it. Even without words, you weren't impressed by their status, their connections, or their curated highlight reel. And that made you dangerous. Because people who rely on performance to survive need an audience. You refused to clap. Steve Jobs once said, "Innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower." You brought that same energy, not technological innovation, but spiritual. You showed them there was another way to be. And it made their old patterns feel obsolete. Now they can't go back to who they were before you. They try to slip into their old skin, but it doesn't fit. The mask feels heavier. The games feel pointless. Once you've been seen, you can't pretend you're invisible again. Once truth has cracked your false self open, even patching it back together leaves visible fractures. And that's the haunting part. They're not tormented by what you did to them. They're tormented by what you showed them about themselves. Proverbs 27:19 says, "As water reflects the face, so one's life reflects the heart." You became that water, that clear, undeniable reflection. Look at someone like Malala Yousafzai. She didn't have to attack anyone directly to shatter lies. Her survival and continued advocacy made the falsehood of her enemies impossible to sustain. In the same way, your existence alone proved their image was never as strong as they wanted the world to believe. So let me ask you, chosen one, how many times have you been blamed for changing everything when all you did was walk in and be yourself? How many times have people accused you of causing a collapse, when in reality, you just revealed the cracks they'd been covering? You didn't enter their life to destroy their foundation, but your presence made it impossible for them to keep living on one that wasn't real. And whether they admit it or not, they'll never forget the moment the mask slipped and the truth stared back at them through your eyes. Number 9. They never loved you, they loved who they were when you were near. Chosen one. Have you noticed the pattern? How some people swear they miss you, but if you listen closely, what they're really missing is themselves. They never truly loved you. They loved the version of themselves that only existed when they stood in your light. You didn't awaken desire, you awakened remembrance. Being around you stirred something ancient in their soul, something they thought was long gone. The creativity they buried to fit in, the courage they abandoned to play safe, the voice they muted to avoid rejection. You didn't give them these things, you simply lived authentically. And your authenticity reminded them of everything they were too afraid to become. Psalm 36:9 says, "For with you is the fountain of life. In your light we see light." That's exactly what your presence did. It didn't create their light, but it reflected it back to them, and that reflection was intoxicating. Imagine someone living in grayscale for years, numbed by routine, dulled by compromise. Then one day, you walk in, dripping in color, unapologetic, alive, real. That contrast burned, not because it insulted them, but because it convicted them. You made them feel again, dream again, hope again. And once you left, that fire went out and the cold rushed back in. It's like what happened when Nelson Mandela walked free. His presence reminded an entire nation of who they could be. Or think of Maya Angelou, whose words didn't give people strength, but revealed the strength they'd buried inside. That's what you did. You weren't their desire, you were their reflection. Before fear, before compromise, before they traded their soul for safety. Have you ever noticed how some people mistake conviction for attraction? They called it love. They said they missed you. But what they were really missing was the way they felt about themselves when you were near. You were a mirror that said, "It's not too late. Healing is possible. Purpose survive pas." James 1:23-24 says, "Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and, after looking at himself, goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like." That's what happened. They saw their true self in your presence. But the moment you walked away, they forgot. Now they cheer for you in public. But the cheer is laced with quiet bitterness, because every step you take in truth reminds them they're still standing in denial. They applaud you, but inside they're thinking, "That could have been me if I'd been brave enough." Consider the story of the Apostle Peter. He walked with Jesus, experienced miracles, even declared his loyalty. Yet when the pressure came, fear made him deny the very truth he'd tasted. But that denial didn't erase the awakening Jesus had sparked in him. In the same way, your absence doesn't erase the seed you planted in their soul. Some watch you now with admiration, others with envy. The truth? They're torn, inspired by your courage, but reminded of their own surrender to fear. They haven't forgiven themselves for letting the light go out. Proverbs 27:19 tells us, "As water reflects the face, so one's life reflects the heart." You became that water for them, clear, honest, revealing. But reflections can be uncomfortable when you're not ready to face what's looking back. Think about Oprah Winfrey. Her journey from trauma to triumph doesn't just inspire, it forces people to confront why they've settled. Your story does the same. Your very existence asks, "If I could rise from this, why can't you?" And that question lingers long after you've left the room. It wasn't about love. It was about awakening. You were the spark, the shift, the soul quake. And now, they watch from a distance, half in awe, half in regret. Not because they lost you, but because they lost themselves again when they lost your presence. Isaías 60:1 declares, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you." You live in that verse now. They could too, but they have to choose it for themselves. So let me ask you, chosen one, will you keep dimming your light to avoid reminding people of their own shadows? Or will you keep walking in color, knowing that for some, Your very existence is the reminder they desperately need, even if it makes them uncomfortable, because whether they admit it or not, they will never forget the version of themselves they met in your presence. And deep down, they'll always know that was their truest self. Number 10. Your existence is a walking reminder that their superiority was always a lie. Chosen one. Have you realized that for some people, their sense of worth depended on believing they were above you, not just out of pride, but for survival? They needed that fantasy, the way a drowning person needs a life raft. Without it, they would have to face an uncomfortable truth that their superiority was never real to begin with. They built their comfort on false comparisons. They told themselves, your silence meant weakness. Your humility meant ignorance. Your struggles meant you'd reached your limit. And every time they repeated these lies, they could sleep a little easier. Have you ever met someone who had to underestimate you in order to feel secure? That's what you were dealing with. Proverbs 16, 18 warns. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. They mistook your quiet for emptiness. Not realizing it was depth, they saw your stillness and called it stagnation. Not knowing it was strategy, they judged your background and flaws. Never realizing those very things were shaping the strength they'd one day have to reckon with. Here's the thing. You never rose to prove them wrong. You rose because their opinions were never your ceiling. Think of it like this. Imagine someone building a throne on a foundation made of ego, comparison, and control. Then one day, the very person they mocked walks by free, grounded, unbothered. No crown, no applause, no performance, just presence. Suddenly, that throne doesn't feel as high. History has seen this before. Think of Nelson Mandela emerging from 27 years in prison with dignity so powerful it humbled entire governments. Or Rosa Parks sitting quietly on a bus, dismantling the false hierarchy of segregation without raising her voice. That's the power you carry. Your existence alone challenges the structures others built to feel important. Isaiah 2:17 says, "The arrogance of man will be brought low, and human pride humbled. The Lord alone will be exalted in that day." Your journey has been living proof of that. They laughed at you. They belittled you. They excluded you. And yet, without revenge, without theatrics, you ascended, quietly, gracefully, aligned with something bigger than yourself. And here's the part they can't stomach. Everything they tried to take from you became fuel. Every betrayal became wisdom. Every setback became a setup. Your growth is the evidence that their hierarchy was built on delusion. Have you noticed how they've gone silent now? That the gossip has dried up? It's not because they've moved on, it's because they no longer have the upper hand in the story. Philippians 2:3-4 reminds us, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others." You've lived that. While they clawed for status, you built substance. And in the end, substance always outlasts spectacle. Every time you show up now, rooted, radiant, unshakable, they're reminded they got it wrong. They can't meet your eyes, because your very presence rewrites the script they built to feel superior. You've become what Muhammad Ali once described. It's not bragging if you can back it up. Except you never had to brag, your life speaks for itself. Think of Malala Yousafzai, standing in the halls of the United Nations after being shot in the head by those who thought they could silence her. Her survival and success dismantled their narrative entirely. That's what your presence does. It makes the old lies impossible to sustain. Psalm 23:5 says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows." You're living that reality. You've entered spaces they swore you'd never touch. You carry a peace they can't counterfeit, a confidence they can't teach, and a resilience they can't replicate. And now, they know. They know you were never below them. The truth is, they were never ready to stand beside you. Your very existence shattered the illusion they built their pride on. And even as they try to pick up the pieces, the foundation will never feel as solid, because deep down, they know the truth has already won. So let me ask you, chosen one, why would you ever lower yourself to fit back into a hierarchy you've already outgrown? Why would you let their fantasy define your reality when your reality has already exposed the fantasy? The answer is simple: you won't, and that's why you've already won. Number 11. They don't praise you publicly, but they study you like you're sacred. Chosen one. Have you ever wondered why people who never clap for you still somehow know everything about you? Why the ones who never like your posts can still quote your words? Why those who act indifferent seem to know your schedule better than your friends? It's because they don't follow you for applause. They follow you for guidance. They'll never say it out loud. They'll never post it on their feed, but your story, it's their secret gospel. Your life has become a quiet obsession, a sacred text they return to in the privacy of their own thoughts, especially when their carefully crafted self-image starts to crack. You are the proof they wish didn't exist, because your very existence redefines what's possible. You weren't supposed to survive. You weren't supposed to heal. You weren't supposed to rise from the rubble, shining brighter than before. But you did, and now they can't stop watching, not with celebration, but with the same quiet fixation a student gives to a teacher they can't admit they respect. Psalm 23:5 says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows." You are living that verse? They are seated at the table, not to cheer for you, but to watch how you eat, how you rise, how you move. They track your moves like rituals. They replay your decisions. Not out of admiration, they're willing to admit, but out of silent desperation. How did they get through that? How did they not fall apart? How did they turn nothing into something? These are the questions they whisper to themselves late at night, when the noise dies down and their curated confidence no longer holds. In their quiet moments, they measure themselves against you, even when their ego screams not to. Their spirit can't help it, because somewhere inside, they know you've walked through storms they wouldn't have survived. History is full of this silent study. Vincent van Gogh died in obscurity, his art dismissed. But decades later, the very techniques people ignored became the blueprint for generations of painters. Harriet Tubman was hunted in her lifetime, yet former critics ended up retelling her strategies as lessons in courage. Nikola Tesla was ridiculed, yet many of his concepts were adopted without his name attached. You, chosen one, are living in that same space, ignored in public, imitated in private. They turned your survival into their strategy, but they'll never give you the credit. You've become their unspoken comparison point, the standard they measure against, the blueprint they wish they could follow without exposing their envy. You didn't ask for this role. You didn't audition to be anyone's sermon. But when life beat you down and you got back up, not with bitterness, but with grace, with stillness, with fire in your eyes, they took notes. They didn't tell you they were taking notes, but they were. Proverbs 4:23 says, Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And because you've guarded yours, everything you do flows with an authenticity they can't manufacture. That's what draws them in, even if they pretend otherwise. They saved screenshots of your posts. They rewrote their goals after watching you quietly achieve yours. Imagine that your pain becoming someone else's hidden religion, your resilience shaping the private theology of people who once called you weak, unqualified, or broken. And yet, they can't clap for you in public. Why? Because clapping would mean confessing that you were always the one who had it, that they misjudged you, that you became what they told themselves was impossible. Look at the life of Jesus. The Pharisees studied him, his words, his actions not to honor him. But because they couldn't ignore the authority he carried, they needed his example even while plotting against him. That's you. They may oppose you outwardly, but inwardly, they're learning from you. They pretend not to see you, but they mirror your moves in private. They echo your words in conversations you'll never hear. They borrow your glow, your wisdom, your mindset, then reshape it as their own. But deep down, they know exactly where the flame came from. It's like what happened with Maya Angelou's poetry. People who once dismissed her work have borrowed her words for speeches and campaigns, passing them off as if the wisdom originated with them. Greatness is often echoed without attribution. They can't give you public recognition because public recognition would strip away the illusion they've built about themselves. It would expose the fact that while they've been performing stability, you've been building it from the ashes. While they've been faking peace, you've been cultivating it in truth. Isaiah 60:20 reminds us, when the time is right, I, the Lord, will make it happen. You didn't force your influence. It happened naturally, and that's what makes it undeniable. You became the divine interruption they thought they could ignore. And now they're haunted, not by your presence in the room, but by the fact that they still haven't become what you proved was possible. Your journey stands as a silent challenge to their excuses. Your resilience whispers, you could have done it too. And that's what keeps them from sleeping peacefully. So, chosen one, let me ask you, how many of your quiet victories are being studied by people who once swore they'd never look your way? How many private imitators are building their lives off the blueprint you bled for? Think of Malala Yousafzai. Even those who once dismissed her now shape policies and speeches with the same convictions she fought for, often without crediting her name. That's the power of an unshakable life. It becomes a reference point, even for those too proud to admit it. John 1:5 says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." Your light is shining whether they acknowledge it or not. They can quote your words without tagging you. They can mimic your steps without thanking you. They can study your resilience without honoring your name. But they can't erase the fact that you've become the quiet revolution they model themselves after. And here's the truth that should set you free. You don't need their credit to validate your calling. Their silent study is proof enough. The fact that your life has become their unspoken textbook tells you everything you need to know. You're already living in the kind of influence that can't be bought, borrowed, or faked. So keep moving, keep rising, keep building, because while they may never praise you publicly, they'll keep turning the pages of your story in private, and every chapter will remind them of the truth. You were always the one. Number 12. You weren't just a person, you were the test. They failed silently and completely. chosen one. Let's be clear, you weren't just a chapter in their story. You were the entire test. And they didn't just fail, they failed so quietly, so completely, that they didn't even realize the results until it was too late. They didn't just lose you, they lost access to the elevation your presence carried, and now, whether they admit it or not, they're stuck replaying the same question over and over. What would my life look like if I hadn't fumbled that? Your arrival wasn't random. You weren't a coincidence. You weren't just another face passing through. You were the divine interruption, the checkpoint where heaven itself asked them, "Are you ready for the next level?" You weren't sent as a background character in their drama. You were the walking invitation to transformation. Psalm 105:19 says, "Until the time came to fulfill his dreams." The Lord tested Joseph's character, just like Joseph's brothers. They were given an opportunity to handle greatness with humility. And instead, they mishandled the gift. You didn't come demanding anything. You didn't try to control or force their growth. You simply were real, rooted, radiant, and that alone was the test. Could they recognize the value standing right in front of them? Could they choose growth over ego? Honesty over manipulation? Light over shadow? You showed up wrapped in grace, patience, and clarity. You brought something sacred into their space, a mirror to reveal truth, a portal into a higher frequency, a taste of what elevation feels like. But instead of honoring it, they tried to shrink you. Instead of rising to meet the standard, they tried to pull you down to match their comfort zone. Think of it like Martin Luther King Jr. showing up in a city steeped in injustice. Some people joined the movement, others mocked it, not because he was wrong, but because his presence exposed who they really were. That's exactly what happened to you. Your energy forced a choice, and they chose ego over evolution. Proverbs 1:7. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. They were handed wisdom in the form of your presence, and they treated it like it was ordinary. You weren't sent to play with them, you were sent to elevate them. And when they failed to rise, the opportunity vanished. They didn't just mishandle your heart, they mishandled the frequency you carried. You didn't just offer love, you offered awakening, but they tried to exploit it, lie to it, manipulate it. Think about Oprah Winfrey. There were people who underestimated her early in her career, not realizing she was about to redefine media forever. They treated her like an option and lost the opportunity to stand beside her rise. That's what you represent in their story, the one they could have built with. But instead, they burned the bridge before they knew where it led. The universe gave them a shot at growth, and they flinched. Your silence now isn't petty revenge, it's a locked gate. Matthew 7:6 says, "Do not give dogs what is holy, do not throw your pearls to pigs." You were the pearl, and when they chose shadow over sincerity, the gate closed. They laughed when you gave without keeping score. They mocked your peace, your depth, your integrity. They mistook your humility for naivety, not realizing you were testing their capacity to value what was in front of them. And now, the test is over, and they failed. Look at the life of Nikola Tesla. Many ignored, stole from, or mocked him while he was alive, missing the chance to collaborate with a mind centuries ahead of his time. Now his legacy is studied, but access to him is gone forever. You are walking in that same principle. Your elevation is now untouchable because they mishandled their season of access. Now, as you rise, healed, whole, untouchable, they're stuck watching from the sidelines. They can't help but mentally replay the exact moments they fumbled. Your exit wasn't impulsive. It wasn't emotional. It was prophetic. You were the assignment, the upgrade, the divine test, and they treated you like an option. John 15:6 says, "If anyone does not remain in me, he is like a branch that is thrown away and withers." They disconnected from the vine of growth you represented, and now they're withering in the same cycles you once invited them out of. Your growth has become the loudest answer to every doubt they ever voiced about you. You don't need to confront them. You don't need revenge. Your evolution is the proof. Your peace is the echo of a door now permanently closed. Think of Princess Diana, once underestimated and underestimated again. Yet her grace, even after leaving the royal circle, became the proof of her worth. She didn't fight for her old place. She built a new one. And history remembers her on her own terms. That's you. You've stopped auditioning for a role in their life, and you've rewritten the script. Let them spiral. Let them obsess, because they're not haunted by your absence. They're haunted by the version of themselves they could have become through you. And now, as they scroll in silence, trying to decode what they once dismissed, your life becomes the sacred text they'll never fully understand, but will never stop reading. Isaiah 43:18-19 says, "Forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. You are the new thing they weren't ready for. You are the closed chapter they keep rereading, hoping the ending will change, but it won't. So let me ask you, chosen one, how many times have you been sent into someone's life as an answer, only to be treated like a question? How many doors have you had to close? Not because you stopped caring, but because the other person refused to step through. Your silence now is not cruelty, it's stewardship. You've learned that not everyone can carry the frequency you walk in, and the truth is, when the test is over, the results are final. They didn't just lose a person, they lost the elevation that only comes when God sends someone carrying a piece of your next level. And that loss, it echoes far louder than your presence ever did. Beloved chosen ones, if these words have reached the deepest places of your heart today, don't let them just sit here and fade into the noise of another scroll. Let them move you, steer you, and then let them move through you. If someone in your life has been doubting their worth, questioning their calling, or losing sight of who they really are, share this message with them. You never know, your act of sharing might be the very lifeline they've been waiting for, the divine confirmation their soul has been crying out for. This is not just content to fill your feed, this is a mission. Every time we gather here, we are building a space where truth lives, where dignity is restored, where calling is remembered, and your presence here makes that possible. You are not just a listener, you are part of this mission, part of this movement, part of the unfolding story that heaven is writing in this moment. I want to stop right here and say something from my heart. Thank you, truly. Thank you for showing up, for staying until the end, for listening with your spirit, and for allowing yourself to be reminded of the truth you already carry. Some of you have been with me from the beginning. Some of you found this space just today. But whether you've been here for years or minutes, I honor your presence. To those of you who have gone the extra step to support through super thanks, your generosity keeps this mission alive and flowing. It fuels the ability to keep creating, to keep reaching hearts in every corner of the world. And yet, I need you to hear me clearly, whether you've ever given financially or not. My gratitude for you is the same. Your time, your engagement, your prayers, your willingness to share. These are priceless gifts. You are seen, valued, and appreciated beyond words. Beloved, as we close this message, I need you to remember something. Some people failed their test when they failed to recognize you. That does not make you less. It does not diminish your worth. In fact, it confirms your calling. You are not defined by the blindness of others. You are defined by the vision God placed inside you. So I speak this blessing over you now. May your days ahead be filled with peace that cannot be disturbed. May doors open for you that no person, no system, no spirit can shut. May you walk in a confidence that cannot be taught, because it is rooted in the one who made you. May your steps be guided into divine alignment, and may favor chase you down in every season. May your mind remain clear, your heart remain tender, and your spirit remain unshakable in the face of anything that tries to move you. Stay divine, stay unshakable, stay chosen. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, walk boldly, knowing exactly who you are, and never let the world convince you otherwise.